The Petroleum Industry Act has become law, yes, and established a new reality for Nigeria's oil and gas industry after 2 decades in the making. The scale of changes implemented by the Petroleum Industry Act is widespread and profound, one which has its roots and branches overall of the administrative, regulatory, and fiscal regime, as well as key petroleum institutions. The new act delivers much needed stability for the industry in settling the applicable regulatory and fiscal terms. Among the top changes in the upstream sector includes fundamental reforms of the administrative and regulatory regime and petroleum institutions, general reduction in the taxation and royalty take of new converted licenses from the prior fiscal regime, amongst others. Well, let's discuss the implementation and, of course, the impact of the PIA. Joining us to do this is an energy policy analyst and a partner at Zara Advisory and Consulting, Mr. Joseph Nwakwue. Good afternoon, Mr. Nwakwue. It's really good to see you.
Good afternoon, Tolulope. Pleased to be here.
Yes, I'm going to start this way, something like an overview. Too much talk about the PIA, and it seems like it's a tall order to me. All of these investments that we are looking at, do you really think that with the current situation we face, the PIA would still be able to make us achieve or maybe cover lost grounds?
Well, that's the expectation for most people. We wish that will happen, and there's sufficient enough provisions in the Act to attract the level of investment that the industry sorely needs. However, of course, you know the headwinds that are there. The energy transition is here, zero carbon initiatives, and so those and a lot of funding agencies are really moving away from fossil fuel funded. So there are challenges, but I think by and large, I think that the fiscal arrangement that we have in the PIA is sufficient enough to attract the much needed investments.
Now, we have a transition period of 12 months. We have a steering committee being chaired by the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. Now, what do you think should be the first, second, third steps? How do you think we'll go about this, implementing this document?
Okay, in terms of implementation, the law actually set out certain items. They've put some timelines on them. So the way to look at it is that there are things that have statutory timelines as defined in the Act itself, and there are things that are consequential to those activities. So you have to look at those two sets of deliverables as far as implementation goes. So I will say the 12-month period is a period within which certain activities need to happen, but implementation will go way beyond the 12-month period. So we need to understand that. The first thing I think is that the law says in section, I think it's 3177, that the minister within 2 months, within 60 days, needs to come out with a transition plan. The word said clear transition plan. So that's an expectation that I know that the committee setup is working. Hopefully they will come out within that time frame with a plan that defines all the moving parts and how they will move. So that's one. So once you have a transition plan, it will of course include all the other activities, whether they are statutorily required within the law or consequential to activities that are already carried out. The other thing will be setting up the institutions. Remember that this is a reform legislation that seeks to basically reform all the institutions in the sector. So there's quite a bit of institution building that needs to happen. So I think that's in the order of priority that will come first, because you need those institutions in place. You need especially the regulatory institutions. You need the commercial entity setup. I think the NNPC setup is supposed to be within 6 months of commencement of the Act. So there are a lot of other activities. So you need the institutions set up. So once you get the institutions set up, then the other activities that will happen. And it's important to remember too that the implementation is not just going to be by government or its committee. Implementation includes all the stakeholders. The industry has a role to play in implementation. The other stakeholders, the unions, all have a role to play in implementation. So I think, for instance, if you take the deregulation section 205, that would not happen without some alignment with the unions. So for that to happen, some engagement needs to happen. So I think that overall, in terms of priorities, until we see the transition plan that the minister puts forward, it will be difficult to say what his top priorities will be. But my personal view is that building the institutions that will drive the reform is critical. So I will attack that first. And then, of course, all the other activities will line up. There are quite a lot of, this is a lot of work. If you look at what the Act intends to achieve, it's really going to kind of reform the entire sector. So there's quite a lot of activities that need to happen. And it's not going to happen in 12 months. So the transition will be for 12 months, but the implementation will continue beyond that 12-month period.
Something that is also interesting to me, and we're also yet to talk about it, we are kind of silent, is the issue of deregulation, of course, subsidy, where it stays in all of this. We know there are still ongoing talks between Labour and the federal government and all of that, but according to what we understand, it's already a law. So where do we stand with regards to deregulation and subsidy issue at the moment, Mr. Nwakwue?
Okay, the law says in section 205 that yes, the pricing of all products will be based on market demand and supply, essentially competitive market terms. So that means subsidy removal will happen. But they were very careful not to put an effective date. So if you read very many other sections, they will say from the commencement of the act or from the effective date, something will happen. But in this very case, they were silent on that, and I think it was deliberate. I think it's just enough to allow the engagement with the stakeholders, all the other stakeholders, including the labor unions, to ensure alignment before you implement. So it didn't quite put, there's only one place, I think it's in 317, where it kind of implied that, well, where there is a net import situation that, or you're going to have a crisis, that the minister would declare NNPC Limited a supplier of last resort, and that it will play that role for a 6-month period. So are we in that situation? So the question people will ask is that, are we not currently in that position where NNPC is the supplier of last resort? So if that's the case, do we have a line of sight to how this, in obeying the law, that means that role, it needs to exit that role in 6 months. So when do we start counting that? So these are some of the things I think a transition plan should highlight.
While we're talking about this, I have to bring up the issue of the host community issues, which has been topical since the signing into law of this much awaited document, and of course the frontier exploration aspect of it. I like your views with regards to these two very important issues.
Well, as regards implementation of the provisions as regards the host community, I think it's section 236 says it gives a 12-month period within which the trust will be set up. So from the effective date, 12 months from that, all the trusts should have been set up. That's what the law says. So I hope that will happen. As regards to how it will work, I think that the framework that has been provided is workable if we implement this faithfully. I suspect that, remember that this is the first time we're having a direct statutory provision that delivers something to the host communities directly. Before now, we've always passed, derivation was passed through the states, and we know what happened with that. So I hope that this will at least help drive development within those communities. In terms of the Frontier Fund, my thought is there is need to continue to explore. We don't want the oil to remain in the ground, especially given that we are talking about the zero carbon world in the near term, really. So if that's the case, you want to find as much oil as possible within your territory, and monetize it. It's not just finding it; it's monetizing it. My view on the provisions of the act as like this. I think that the initial drafts of the bill had taken that role. It says, okay, this will be market driven. So it put in the commission. If you look at the versions that were circulated last year, that role was in the commission. Now, suddenly the final version transferred that role to NNPC. I think that it violates a principal objective of the act itself, which is separation of roles. That activity is a commercial activity. So we should not earmark it for any entity. It should be competitively bidded for. If NNPC wins it, that's fine. So the way it's been set up today is almost like we've earmarked certain things for a company that's supposed to be competing with everyone else. So that creates a kind of a monopoly situation for NNPC. And I don't think that was the intent when we started out on this journey. But again, having said that, whoever can find the oil, let's get it done. My view is there are a few things that changed as regards exploration and how it's done, the amount of money that's set apart and all that. I think those are just details. The important thing is that we need exploration to kickstart. It's not happening today. Even within the known basins, there's zero exploration going on. So we need to enhance exploration, not just in the frontier. That is the only way we can know exactly what we have and plan on monetizing it. So if NNPC is going to do that, that's fine. Let's get it done. The important thing is that we need to move, we need to add results, we need to develop assets and produce them in good enough time so that they do not become obsolete. If oil becomes obsolete, then of course it will just be what it is. It will be like coal, and we don't want that to happen. So I think that the provisions that has been made, in my view, were done with a mindset of preserving the monopoly of a state entity, and I don't think that gives us the optimum result at the end of the day.
No, very, very interesting. Most thank you very much for that submission. But now let's shift our conversation to the state of our refineries. I like your expert view on this. We know that $1.5 billion is being at the moment used to rehabilitate the Port Harcourt refinery, and I think we will still have others rehabilitated too. Now, before now, we've had turnaround maintenances, and Nigerians have always complained about, and even the level of productivity of these refineries, they still continue to get money from the corporation, but they are not churning out anything one way or the other. Now, what do you make of all of this? What do you think would have been done? Putting behind putting also into cognizance the issue of the Dangote refinery that we are all waiting for, 650,000 barrels per day.
Well, I think the refinery story, we've talked extensively on this. My personal view is that if I was Nigeria, I would have sold those refineries a long time ago. That's private capital. Okay, just think about it this way. Okay, we have borrowed money to rehabilitate those refineries, 3 of them. I think we're borrowing $2.9 billion combined to do that. And the financiers are saying, well, you need to have an O&M contractor who is a third party, private entity, to run the refinery so we can get our money back, which is the same argument. We needed, so the capital is coming from private entities, the operation and maintenance is coming from private entities. So what are we really bringing? So why didn't we even sell it it's the same private entities that you're going to give it to anyway. So we're just dancing around, if you ask me. The refineries require an infusion of private capital. They require an infusion of technical know-how. We don't have both as a nation, right? So we should have sold them. That's my personal view on that issue. Now, if we get to rehabilitate it and it can run, fine. That would be good. But government has taken a decision, so it doesn't really help that we are, we made our views clear before the decision was taken, and they went ahead to take the decision. So that's fine. We'll live with the outcomes. Dangote is hopefully will save us. He will probably, if we can get him 2022, 2023, whenever that happens, we need to exit importation of products. As a country, it's a shame we're doing that. We need to exit that as soon as possible. It does not help us at all. So Dangote and all the other boarding or refineries that are planned, I hope, with the provision of the PIA, which deregulates pricing, I hope that they will all now be encouraged to invest, because there's a linkage between the resistance to investment over the years and the pricing regime. There's a relationship there. People always have argued that they could not invest in refining in a country where prices are fixed by government. So now, if that hopefully goes away, I do not see what will be holding them from putting their money where their mouth is.
Now, on a final note, it's a two-in-one question. If all is properly implemented, like we said, in 6 months, NNPC becomes the company under KAMA, implementation goes on as planned, when do you think the positives of the PIA, when do you think it will start trickling in? And what's your outlook for the crude oil market as we move on? Do you see a market getting to $80, $90 per barrel? What are you thinking?
Okay, there are two. Okay, I would have said no, but to the last point you made about pricing, but I wouldn't say that today. The reason is this: there is the euphoria, there's this pressure to defund fossil fuel projects. What that would do at some point is that we are not investing, and I'm talking globally now. The industry is not investing at the level to sustain production. If that happens, at some point we are going to run out. Well, there's going to be a supply shortfall, and that will lead to a spike in oil price. I see that coming if we continue the current level of investment, because money is moving away from oil and gas. Demand for oil and gas is not quite, yes, COVID had done some damage to demand, but ultimately it's going to recover, and that demand will be there. If that demand is there and supply falls short of that, prices could go beyond 100. I don't know when it will happen. I haven't quite looked at the numbers, but if we continue to underinvest as an industry, that will surely happen. So that's my point on outlook. But all things being equal, I expect prices to remain around where they are. COVID, Delta is done. Recovery would have been a lot stronger than it is today if not for the Delta variant, and we see the impact. So, but the expectation is that with more vaccination, that demand recovery will continue to grow. If that happens, then that means capacities will have to be unleashed to fill that gap. I do hope that the industry continues to invest at levels to sustain supply. Otherwise, we're going to see prices should hit the roof. So that's what I would say to that. In terms of what benefit, when do we start seeing the benefits of the reform? I think it will take a while. If you're looking at the financial benefits, it will take some time, but there might be some immediate benefits. For instance, if we deregulate pricing, I expect to see a lot more investment in the midstream, refining, gas plants, and all that. So if that happens, and that would be far more immediate than the other benefits that we hope to get, which is and that will come with employment, that will come with taxation and all that. So it will take a while. Remember, if you invest today, the gestation period for a typical refinery is 4-5 years. And if you did that, you probably have a tax holiday for another 5 years. So we won't get taxes until maybe after the 10th year. So it will take some time, like I said, but there are immediate benefits. Jobs, for instance, will come, enhanced economic activity that will have some spin-offs on the economy. That's what we need right now. And I think if the PIB is, like I said, faithfully implemented, we stand a very good chance of getting some of them.
It's really interesting talking to you, particularly when it has to do with the oil and gas sector. What do we expect from a professional? I've been speaking to Mr. Joseph Nwakwue. He was a past chairman also of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Nigerian Council, but I speak in the capacity of energy analyst and also partner at Zero Advisory and Consulting. Thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us on Business Nigeria. We appreciate this.
Thank you very much, Olu.